The encounter between Muslims and Vikings is one of the most fascinating and dynamic chapters in medieval global history. Between the 8th and 11th centuries, Norse seafarers known for their raids, explorations, and vast trading networks came into contact with the Islamic world in multiple regions: Al-Andalus, North Africa, Sicily, the Eastern Mediterranean, and most significantly, the Abbasid Caliphate through the vulgar trade routes. These cross-cultural interactions were not limited to warfare or raiding. They also included trade, diplomacy, cultural exchange, and even conversion. While commonly overshadowed by narratives of Viking raids in Western Europe, the contact between the Norse and the Muslim world was arguably more extensive, sophisticated, and influential. The Muslim world at the time represented one of the most advanced civilizations on Earth, with flourishing cities, universities, a stable economy, and a vast interconnected trade system. The Vikings were deeply attracted to this world, not only for its wealth, but also for its knowledge, science, social structure, and faith. Over the centuries, these encounters created moments where Vikings adopted Islamic customs, engaged in commerce with Muslim merchants, lived within Muslim lands, and, although rare, some eventually embraced Islam. The Vikings first directly encountered Muslims during their raids on Al-Andalus, Islamic Spain. In 844 CE, a large Viking fleet attacked Seville when it was under the Umayyad Emirate of Cordoba. The Muslim chroniclers describe the invaders as Almajis, fire worshippers, a term used for pagan foreigners. The Arab forces successfully repelled the attack, and many Vikings were captured or killed. Despite this violent first encounter, the Andalusians quickly recognized the commercial potential of dealing with Norse traders. The Vikings, impressed by the advanced architecture, governance, and wealth of Islamic Spain, began engaging peacefully with the region. Muslim coins, dirhams, found in Viking Scandinavia, especially in Sweden, demonstrate active trade routes with the Islamic world. Over 100,000 Islamic silver coins have been discovered in Scandinavia, an astonishing number that reveals far more trade than warfare. The Mediterranean also served as a meeting point. Vikings raided parts of North Africa, but also settled in Sicily and southern Italy regions that had strong Muslim presences. These interactions added to the cultural and economic exchange, introducing the Norse to textiles, metalwork, spices, and scientific knowledge. The most significant Muslim-Viking interactions occurred through the vulgar trade routes, where the Rus-Norse traders, who settled in modern Russia and Ukraine, traveled down the river systems toward the Caspian Sea and the Abbasid Caliphate. The Abbasid Caliphate, 750 to 1258 CE, was the wealthiest empire of the time, with cities such as Baghdad, Samarra, and Basra serving as global centers of science, philosophy, medicine, and commerce. Vikings who reached these regions were overwhelmed by the sophistication of Islamic civilization. Many Viking traders settled temporarily or permanently in territories influenced by Islam, some serving as mercenaries, bodyguards, or merchant intermediaries. The Abbasid dinar and dirham became prized currencies in the Viking world because of their purity and stability. Norse economies were transformed in part by this influx of Islamic silver. The most detailed account of Muslim-Viking contact comes from Ahmad ibn Fadlan, a 10th century envoy of the Abbasid Caliph, who encountered the Rus in 922 CE along the Volga River. His writings provide an extraordinary ethnographic description of the Norse people. Ibn Fadlan describes the Vikings as tall, physically strong, and heavily tattooed. He noted their practices in trade, hygiene, social customs, and religion. His famous description of the Viking funeral, where a slave girl was sacrificed and burned with a chieftain, remains one of the most vivid medieval ethnographies. Although he criticized the pagan aspects of Norse ritual, Ibn Fadlan also admired their honesty in business and the respect they had among themselves. His account shows that the Norse were deeply engaged with Muslim traders, and many lived in proximity to Islamic communities along the Vuelor. Although conversions were not widespread, there is clear evidence that some Vikings did embrace Islam. This happened in several ways as Viking merchants settled in Muslim-controlled trading posts or traveled repeatedly through Islamic territories. Some adopted local customs and, in a few cases, Islamic beliefs. Conversion facilitated easier trade, marriage, and legal integration. A surprising number of Islamic coins found in Sweden, especially on Gotland, have been modified into pendants, jewelry, or amulets. Some coins bear inscriptions such as the Shahada, "There is no God but Allah," which suggests that the words carried spiritual significance for their Viking owners. Archaeologists argue that some Norse individuals found meaning in Islamic monotheism, especially as Scandinavia was already transitioning away from Norse paganism. There is evidence of Norse individuals with Arabic or Islamic-inspired names. Scandinavian sources refer to individuals such as Waisef the Russ and Ibrahimaku Baltushi, a Jewish traveler from Al-Andalus who encountered Norse communities and recorded instances of cultural blending. Several historians discussed the possibility that certain Viking-descended rulers in the Volga-Bulgar region converted to Islam after settling among Muslim Bulgars. Their descendants maintained Islamic identity for generations. The Islamic world was by far more technologically and culturally advanced than the societies of Northern Europe at the time. Vikings encountering the elegance of Islamic cities, the fairness of Islamic law, and the unity of monotheism may have been moved intellectually and spiritually. By the time of their deeper interactions with Muslims, the Norse world was already exposed to Christianity. Monotheism was no longer entirely foreign, making conversion to Islam more plausible. The presence of Muslim traders, scholars, and diplomats along the Volga and Caspian routes exposed many Vikings to Islamic teachings. The respectful yet firm approach of travelers such as Ibn Fadlan likely left an impression. Even when conversion did not occur, Viking-Muslim contact left deep marks on Norse culture. Many Viking textile patterns show clear influences from Islamic geometric art. Fragments of silk from Baghdad and Central Asia have been found in Viking graves. Arabesque designs, Kufic-style inscriptions, and Islamic artistic motifs appear on Viking weaponry, jewelry, and clothing. Some Viking swords bear fake Arabic inscriptions, suggesting that Islamic craftsmanship was considered high prestige. Muslim advances in astronomy and navigation indirectly influenced Viking seafaring through intercultural exchange with Eastern traders. In Ibn Fadlan's writings, he notes that some Rust adopted Muslim customs such as cleanliness after using the restroom or washing before prayer-like rituals. These were likely early stages of cultural assimilation. Several groups of Vikings settled or operated within Muslim territories. Some Viking warbands raided along the Caspian Sea, attacking Muslim settlements, but also eventually integrating and settling in some regions. While the Varangian Guard is most known for serving in the Byzantine Empire, there is evidence that Norse mercenaries also entered the service of Muslim rulers, especially in the Caucasus and Central Asia. Archaeological and written sources confirm that Norse merchants lived in Muslim-controlled trading hubs, leading to intermarriage and assimilation. The interactions between Muslims and Vikings reshaped both civilizations in subtle yet profound ways. The Islamic silver economy helped build early Scandinavian towns such as Birka and Hedby. Material wealth from Muslim lands played a key role in the rise of Viking Age power structures. The Vikings brought home not just wealth, but knowledge, new technologies, artistic styles, and even early exposure to monotheistic ideas. The fact that some Vikings embraced Islam reveals the permeability of cultural and religious boundaries. It challenges the simplistic stereotype of Vikings as purely raiders, showing them instead as global travelers and participants in a multicultural medieval world. Through their contact with Muslims, Vikings served as intermediaries between Northern Europe and the Islamic world. This exchange contributed to the development of medieval trade networks and laid the groundwork for later European engagement with Islamic civilization. The story of Muslim Vikings begins far away from the icy seas of Scandinavia and deep inside the golden age of the Islamic world, at a time when two civilizations that seemed completely opposite were unknowingly walking toward each other, pulled together by trade, curiosity, and destiny. For years, historians painted the Vikings as ruthless raiders who attacked villages, burned monasteries, and stole treasures. But the truth is far more complex, because not all Vikings were destroyers. Many were explorers, traders, diplomats, thinkers, and seekers of knowledge who traveled across continents. Their ships crossed rivers, oceans, deserts, mountains, and even deserts on foot. While they raided the coasts of Europe, they also established peaceful trade routes with the Islamic world. This is the part of history that was hidden, because it changes everything. Imagine the cold northern warriors, tall, bearded, covered in furs, entering the flourishing cities of the Muslim world, like Baghdad, Cordoba, Samarkand, and Damascus, where scholars debated philosophy, scientists studied stars, doctors performed surgeries, and streets glowed with lanterns. The Vikings had never seen anything like this. Their own homelands were simple, tribal, and filled with constant war. But the Muslim world at that time was the most advanced civilization on earth, ruling lands from Spain to China, leading in medicine, mathematics, engineering, astronomy, and literature. When Vikings reached these lands, they were shocked. They had expected riches, but they found something deeper: knowledge, culture, discipline, and faith. And from this meeting, the first seeds of Islam entered Viking hearts. Part 1 ends where the worlds collide, not with swords, but with trade, curiosity, and human connection. Now begins. Hundreds of thousands of Islamic silver coins, dirhams, found across Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland, and Baltic lands, reveal how powerful this connection was. Archaeologists found over 120,000 Islamic coins in Viking territory. Some carried phrases like, La ilaha illallah. These coins weren't just money. They were sacred objects to the Vikings. They wore them as necklaces, charms, and status symbols. They placed Islamic coins inside graves. They offered them to their gods. That alone proves the influence of Islam on their lives. But the story gets even more shocking. In a Viking grave in Burka, Sweden archaeologists found a ring with the word Allah engraved in Kufic script, the earliest form of Arabic writing. This ring belonged to a Viking woman. She wasn't a trader. She wasn't a traveler. She lived her life in the frozen north, yet she wore a ring from the Muslim world with the name of Allah. What does this mean? It means Islam wasn't just passing through, it was entering homes. It was influencing culture. It was shaping identity. Many Vikings traveled to Volga, Bulgaria, a Muslim region, and lived among Muslims for years. Some served as soldiers, some traded, some even married Muslim women. Ibn Fadlan, the Muslim traveler, described Vikings adopting Muslim customs, washing before eating, refusing pork, praying with Muslims, learning Arabic words, and respecting Islamic laws. These are not the actions of casual visitors. These are the behaviors of people being spiritually transformed. Part 2 reveals a hidden truth, that Vikings didn't just meet Muslims, they admired them, learned from them, and in some cases embraced their faith wholeheartedly. Evidence shows some Vikings converted quietly, without making a political movement, but through personal conviction. In Islamic lands, they blended into Muslim society, losing their old identity and becoming warriors of a new world. The shocking truth is only the beginning of what deeper history reveals. Part 3 begins where the influence of Islam on Viking culture becomes undeniable, not just from coins and jewelry, but from the way Vikings began to reshape their lifestyle, thinking, and even their death rituals. Archaeologists discovered Viking graves with items that did not belong to Norse tradition, silk fabrics from Muslim lands, Arabic inscriptions, and geometric patterns inspired by Islamic art. One of the most shocking discoveries was a burial cloth with the words Allah and Ali woven in Kufic script. This stunned historians because it meant Vikings were not simply trading with Muslims. They were bringing Islamic symbolism into their most sacred rituals, death. The Vikings believed grave goods helped the dead in the afterlife. So why include Islamic items unless they held deep meaning? Historians suggest these items came from Vikings who lived among Muslims, fought in Muslim armies, or converted to Islam and brought these influences home. But the clues go deeper. Viking swords began to show Middle Eastern craftsmanship. Some Viking blades carried Arabic patterns and designs. Viking helmets were influenced by Muslim armory. Even Viking longhouses began to show architectural cues from Muslim structures. These weren't random decorations. This was cultural blending on a massive scale. Meanwhile, many Vikings who settled in Muslim lands disappeared into the population. Their children grew up speaking Arabic, praying in mosques, and living completely different lives. These Viking converts would never return home, and their stories were erased by time, but their genetic traces still exist in regions around the Volga and Central Asia. Vikings didn't just visit Muslim lands, they became part of them. The journey into the spiritual transformation of Viking society. Vikings were known for asking big questions. Who created us? What is destiny? What happens after death? Their Norse religion gave them rituals, but not answers. Their gods were unpredictable, mortal, and constantly fighting. So when Vikings encountered Islam, they found a belief system that was clear, powerful, disciplined, and based on knowledge. Islam was not just a religion, it was a complete way of life. It offered structure, justice, prayer, charity, purity, and a direct connection with one God who is all-powerful, all-knowing, and eternal. For Vikings who were tired of endless tribal wars and confused spiritual beliefs, Islam felt like clarity after darkness. Some Vikings converted quietly because adopting a new religion could create conflict back home. But outside Scandinavia, many Vikings accepted Islam openly. Historical records mention Norse warriors serving Muslim rulers in Al-Andalus, North Africa, and the Abbasid Caliphate. These Viking converts learned Arabic, wrote letters to their families, and sometimes tried to convince them to explore the Muslim world. Muslim historians wrote about these northern warriors who displayed unmatched strength, but also embraced Islamic values like honor, discipline, and prayer. Over time, entire trading communities emerged where Vikings and Muslims lived side by side, sharing meals, languages, professions, and eventually families. There are accounts of Vikings refusing wine and pork, adopting Islamic cleanliness rituals, and participating in Muslim festivals. All this leads to a powerful conclusion. Not only did Vikings accept Islam, but many found in it the peace they spent their entire lives searching for. Part 4 ends here with the shocking realization that the world we imagine as divided was far more connected, and the history we learned was only half the truth. The story of Muslim Vikings shows that hearts can change, cultures can merge, and truth can travel across oceans.